Hi, welcome back to the Custom Saber Shop on YouTube. My name is Rob, and today we're going to do something a little special for our more advanced followers. I'm going to show you how to illuminate the crystal in your lightsaber project using a 5mm RGB Accent LED along with your Crystal Focus version 8. Now this is a little bit more advanced, so if you're not familiar with soldering electronics and working on little delicate components, I would suggest not starting with this project. You might try something a little bit more like click here for a link to an easier project, or click here for a link to a similar, easier project with a nano biscotti. They're a great starter board for you to learn how to solder and learn how to assemble the electronics of an illuminated saber. But today we're going to use the Crystal Focus version 8, which is the best sound card available in my opinion. For today, you're going to need an ESD safe soldering iron or soldering station. You're going to need solder. Of course, you're going to need your Crystal Focus, and you're going to need your 5mm RGB LED. You're going to need really little tweezers like this and a very fine point on your soldering iron because we're going to be doing some delicate work. I'm going to be using computer ribbon cable that I've cannibalized from a computer. You could also use the 28 gauge wire that's available at the Custom Saber Shop. At the time of this video, a 5mm RGB LED like the one that we're going to be using is not available at the Custom Saber Shop. You're going to need to find it on eBay or Mauser or something like that. But when you're watching this video, be sure to check the store because it may have become available while this video has been sitting up on YouTube. So I think that's everything we need to talk about. Let's get started. As you can see, I've got my Crystal Focus version 8 already set up with wires for sound and for power. I'm not going to go through a lot of those details because I'm assuming this video is for more advanced users and you'll know how to do that already. As you can see, I've got an RGB 5mm Accent LED wired up here. And I've used some wire that I just got from a computer ribbon cable. It's just a solid core. I don't even know what gauge it is, but it's nice and small. Solid core, something like this is suitable if you're not going to be putting a lot of flexing and stress on it, and once it's in place it stays that way. So it might be handy in an application like this. You don't want it to carry very much current, but being this is just an accent LED, it's suitable. So cannibalized ribbon wire, of course you can use your 28 gauge wire for this, same kind of thing. And I've already wired it up and I've marked and tested where my red lead is, my green, blue, and I'm using a common cathode RGB LED, which means that it's got a common negative line. That's important for setting it up with the Crystal Focus. You wouldn't be able to use a common anode LED. So if you're ordering a 5mm LED like this off eBay or I got mine at Mauser, you might want to make sure to get a common cathode, red, green, blue, 5mm Accent LED. Of course, it's just a battery pack for testing purposes. You notice I haven't attached any of the wires for the main LED or anything like that. We're just going to keep it simple and just focus on this job and testing this job. I'm also, of course, going to today use a soldering iron with a very fine point tip, an ESD safe soldering station. I'm going to use these really little tweezers, and as always, I'm going to use my helping hands to position things and show you how to do this. Okay, as you can see, I've got my Crystal Focus in a little small hobby vise here. You can mount yours in a woodworking clamp that's got some rubber feet on it, or something that you can keep it nice and stable on your work surface when you're working, because this is pretty delicate stuff we're doing today. I'm going to use my little tweezers to point out too. What we're doing is, because we're using the special Accent LED mode that the Crystal Focus version 8 has, we are not going to be, for today's purposes, using all of these. We're only going to be using number 5, number 6, and number 7. So in special accent mode, because the Crystal Focus 8 is a 4-channel board, then 5, 6, 7, and 8 can be selected to use special crystal chamber modes and things like that. But because we're not using a 4th channel, we're just using RGB, we're going to use 5, 6, and 7. So this is the best way I know how to do it. Now the way I wire up my LEDs when I do RGB is I actually do BGR. I won't go into the long story about why I started doing that. I just do them all the same just to help me. So 5 is going to be blue, 6 is going to be green, 7 is going to be red. Now these accent LED pads are all 3.3 volts. So that's great for the blue, and it's great for the green. The red, which my LED is a 2.5 volt forward voltage LED in my red. So that's going to require a resistor. Now there's two ways to do this. You can bridge these pads like I'll show you in a moment, and then put a resistor in line. So in the wire somewhere you'll put a little resistor on the red line. Now it's a simpler way of doing it. This is much more delicate, but this is, saves space, and I wanted to show you. So I'm going to use a 0402 footprint resistor that's going to bridge one of these pads. We're going to bridge the number 7 pad. Very, very small resistor. And I got mine at Mauser. Now I've done the calculations, and I need about a 40 ohm resistor here according to the calculations. However, I know from doing this that if I use a 40 ohm resistor there, my red's going to be a little bit overpowering in my RGB LED, and I want this to shine on my crystal, and I want it to mirror the same blade effect that I'm getting. So if I get a pink or a particular purple blade, I want that to also be reflected in the crystal as close as possible. So I know from doing this that with a 40 ohm resistor, the red's going to be still a little bit too strong. So I've actually gone to an 88 ohm resistor. This works really well. I've tried. So I'm going to show you how to put that in there. Now again, with resistors on LEDs, often it's, like I said, it's more horseshoes and hand grenades. In other words, just get it close. So you don't need to have an exact value of resistor. You actually are looking for the effect. So you have enough of a resistor that it keeps your LED safe, in this case the red, but I want the effect to be what I'm looking for, so I'm going to actually go for, like I said, a 88 ohm resistor. Now what I'm going to do is, as you can see, I'm going to actually just tin just a little tiny bit of solder on the number 7 pad. Now I usually use a magnifying glass when I'm doing this, or magnifying light, but the camera's in the way. So see how my hands are steady enough. Okay, now as you can see I've got those pads tinned, a little bit of solder. So now I'm going to see how well I can do this with the camera. I've got my little tiny resistor, and I have to work around the camera here. I'm going to put it in place, and I'm going to apply the soldering tip. Now I've got it in place. I'm going to inspect it. So it's held on with the one. It's a little too far over. So this is hard to do working around the camera tripod. Let me try it this way. I'm actually going to release this solder and move it over just a tad. Let's inspect that. That looks much better. Now it's secured on one side. So now I just use a little bit of heat from my soldering iron, and I secure the other side. And that is a little tiny resistor bridged into my number 7 pad, which is the red. Now if I wanted, I could get my multitester. This is a good practice to do. And I could set it up to read impedance, and I can just sample from this hole to here and make sure that I'm getting my 88 ohms of resistance. That's just a good way to check it. If I put too much solder in there, it may actually bridge that, in which case I'd get 0 or very little resistance. So that's the resistor. We're going to move on now, and I'm going to show you how to, where's my tweezers? I'll show you how to bridge these pads. Now Irv has done a video where he shows how to bridge those with solder. That's a little bit tricky depending on the temperature of your soldering iron. He also shows a technique that I'm gonna do for you now. I'm gonna use the same little computer ribbon cable, and I'm gonna take one and I'm gonna strip off a good chunk. Just copper, little tiny copper wire. Don't know if you can see it there. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lay that across hold it with my trusty helping hands. These things are super awesome. And what I want to do is I want to line that up right there with those pads that I want to bridge. Of course you need to bridge them, because otherwise there's a gap there and the signal won't go to your LED once it's wired in there. Oops, I bumped it. Let's make sure it's still in place. See if I can do this with the camera in the way. It's my excuse in case I have shaky hands. I want to make sure I don't bridge the solder to the job that I've already done. If I did do that, this stuff is great. This little wire braid, you lay that across, heat it up with your solder iron, it soaks up all the solder, then you can get your parts off there. Okay, now once that's done and I've inspected it, I want to take my knife, and I don't want to, not very much pressure at all, just a little bit of pressure, and then I should be able to work this back and forth and it just snaps right off. And now I've got a nicely bridged dot there. I'm also going to bridge the number 5. So 5 will be bridged, 6 will be bridged, and 7 will be resistored for the red. Okay, so I've got number 5 bridged, number 6 bridged, and number 7 resistored. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to flip the crystal focus over, and I'm going to attach my wires to the underside, which is something I like to do in some builds to keep the wiring clean. As you'll notice, I'm going to do this here. There's corresponding pads that I've marked there. So I'm going to set this up and we'll go from there. Now I've taken my time using my helping hands to get all my wires cut to the right length and lined up and run to the appropriate pad. So I've got my blue to blue, green to green, red to red. These are the positive pads. Of course, a really steady hand. I'm going to do, even though I've got them in place, I'm going to do one at a time, and then I'm going to inspect what I've actually got. Now you notice I'm not just going through the holes, I'm actually laying the wire across the hole. That is a more secure way of doing it. You can lay it across at an angle so that the tip of the wire actually stops at the end of the hole. But that's better than just fitting the wire through the hole and then soldering it. And there you go. Now I can take my helping hands off because I've got the 3 soldered in there. Now I've got my negative wire, my common negative wire, and I happen to know that the ground that I want to use, I want to do to ground, I'm actually going to go to the ground side of this big resistor here. So I'm going to, I made this wire a little bit longer. So I'm going to double check which is which, make sure I'm getting the right pad, and I'm going to line that up and I'm going to solder that right in that guy there, and then we'll be ready to plug this in and test it. Now you notice I've switched the crystal focus around. It's oriented differently to the camera. And the reason is I want the wires to run this way so that I can fold them back over for my application. That's what I'm going to want to do. So I've planned for that. Now it's all attached, we can plug it in and do a test. Alright, it's time for our test. I've got my LED run, I've got a speaker plugged in, just ignore all these wires, it's just a speaker, an old speaker unit. And I'm going to connect my battery, being very careful to make sure that I'm going black to black, red to red, positive to negative. I get my boot up sound. Now, because the boot up, whatever FOD it boots up in is going to be activating a particular accent LED, probably not one of the ones that we've set up, obviously. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use my tweezers to bridge these resistor pads, oh, there you go. There's one of the LEDs indicating now because it's going through an animation. I'm going to bridge these 2 pads, and that's going to serve as a momentary switch. And that starts up that sound font, and you can see I've got red, green, and blue cycling as the bar graph is going through its animation. Now it's just doing whatever animations are programmed into it at the time. This is one that I programmed into a different Saber. I'm going to do this. Turns it off again, so I know everything's working properly. In part 2, I will show you how to configure your SD card to make this work RGB in the way you want to show a crystal. You've got a crystal chamber with something like this, so your LED is going to be lighting a crystal like that. So then your crystal is going to accept the illumination from 5mm LED, and you can already tell that's a really cool effect. But we're going to dial that in even further in part 2. Okay, when you get your Crystal Focus version 8 and you plug in the SD card to your computer, this is what's going to come up. Or if you were to download the default package for Crystal Focus version 8, this is what you're going to see. Now, I need to point out, please read the manual. Everything in this video is just to augment the things that are already in the manual, detailing exactly what I'm showing you. This is just to basically show you how to apply what the manual is telling you. So what we're going to do is we're going to just go into sound bank 1 and alter the settings there. You'll need to alter the settings of all your sound banks, and you can do them differently so that your crystal illumination operates differently in each sound bank if you'd like. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to show you in override text right here. Override text, I'm going to double click on that, and it comes up, and what you see at the very bottom if you scroll down is you've got your color profiles. Obviously if you've got a single color Saber, you want to delete all of these, and then it'll just operate on whatever's in your sound bank. But these overrides will determine what your Saber does. So for setting number 1, when you go through and hit both the auxiliary and the activation buttons together, color 0, which is basically color number 1, channel 1 is 0, channel 2 in my Saber is green, remember it's B, G, R, and then channel 4 does nothing. Blue is 0, green is 740, and red is 0. So you can go through and change, obviously set up your color profiles however you like, and you can have the values up to, you could do up to 2000 milliamps there if you want, if your LED can handle it, if you've got 2 blues linked or something like that. If you're not sure, it's probably safe to stay under 1000. You can do something like that. Anyways, what I want to show you is this is what your blade color is, this is what the flash on clash color is, this is what the lockup color is, and this is what the crystal color is, X color. So X color, or XTAL, as in some of the other ones, will show us what the crystal is doing. So usually what I like to do is whatever my color setting is in here, then the corresponding X color, so color 0 is this, I like X color 0 to match this. That way your crystal is going to match what your blade is. And if you find it's a little too red or a little too green, it's not matching, you can alter the crystal color here so that it matches the blade color. Color number 1, I can have X color number 1 match whatever color number 1 is. I wanted to show you that first. Okay, I'm not going to save it today. So that's the first change you're going to want to make. The next change you're going to want to make is you go into a sound bank number 1. You start number 1, you go through all 12. We don't need to worry about config. Idle, LEDs, and lockup. These are the things that determine what your accent LEDs are doing at any given time. With the Saber's in idle, this file will determine what they're doing while the Saber's in idle, what the Saber's doing when it's on, what the Saber's doing when it's in lockup. So click on that and you're going to see you've got a PLI, power level indicator, glyph. You can read about all these in the manual, but what I'm going to show you here is basically this is what the crystal is doing in idle. Right now it's doing nothing. So if I wanted it to pulse blue, well, I'm going to put 1023 as a maximum number for this setting. So I'm going to put 1023 in there. It's ready to go. And it's going to pulse at this speed, at this intensity. Or is it the other way around? At this speed, at this intensity. Either way, it's already got a pulse setting. You can monkey around with that and find out what you like, whether you want it to pulse fast or slow. If I wanted it to pulse green, I would put 1023 there. If I wanted to pulse purple, I would do a mix of these. So basically that's the way it's going to pulse. If you want it to pulse in matching with the blade color, you can do that in your accent LED mode. So if you change the ACT mode to 1 or 2, the manual will explain what those different settings do. Okay, I'm going to close that out. I'm going to go to LEDs. This is the same kind of thing, but this is when the Saber is in operation. So again, you can change your accent LED mode to have it mirror the blade, or to pulse, or be part of the bar graph or whatever with these settings here. And again, in lockup, it's the same. Determines what happens in lockup. PLI is 1, indicating that the power level indicator will activate when you hit lockup. That's kind of the default mode, but you can make changes to these settings. That's what's going to determine what the crystal is doing. I also want to point out too that let's go LEDs. The half D mode is an interesting one. 0 means none of the other LEDs will come on when the crystal is activating. If I was to put the value of 4 in there, that means the other 4 LEDs that we didn't hook up, if you remember seeing on the crystal focus board, the accent LED 1, 2, 3, and 4, remember we used 5, 6, and 7. Well, this would mean that the other 4 LEDs are doing something while the crystal is doing whatever it is you tell it to do in these settings. So that's just a quick rundown of how those settings work for your crystal focus. So here you can see the completed crystal chassis. Now obviously this is not one made with mostly custom Saber shop parts. This is my own construct, my own design. Of course, the custom Saber shop MHS parts here that I've used, but everything else here is my own. But the point is you can see that my crystal is illuminated by my 5mm LED. It is pulsing red as I've set it to. Now if I was to ignite the Saber, the crystal is now mirroring what the blade is doing. So you see the flash on clash, lock-up effect, and if I change blade colors, the crystal goes through and matches the different blade colors that I've set. And again, it mirrors the blade, and then when I shut off the Saber, the crystal now pulses as I've set it to in the corresponding blade color. So these are just some of the settings that you can utilize to make your crystal chamber really come alive with the illumination that's controlled by the Crystal Focus version 8 by Plektr Labs. So I hope this has been insightful and educational. Thanks again for watching.